good morning and welcome to the sleep webinar today that we have for you. I'm Glenys from the Young Harrow Foundation, and this is part of the Holidays, Activities and Food programme. This is the parent support part, and hopefully many of your children will be out enjoying the activities and taking advantage of what's happening free and exciting over Easter, and hopefully tucking into a healthy meal that you haven't either had to prepare or cook, which has got to be a bonus. So today it's about sleep, and I think we all know the importance of sleep, the knock-on effect that can have to us in terms of feeling tired and irritable and lack of concentration. And I'm going to therefore put you in the safe hands of two experienced people. We've got Lynn and Zena today from the Centre for ADHD and Autism, and they're going to talk you through elements of why sleep's important and coping mechanisms. And hopefully both you and your children will result in having a good night's sleep. So I'm going to now hand you over to Lynn.
Thanks, Glenys. So my name's Lynn and I manage the autism services at the Centre for ADHD and Autism Support. So we're a charity based in Eastcote, and we provide support for individuals who've got ADHD or who are autistic and their families. But I'm also a qualified sleep practitioner, and the reason that I trained as a sleep practitioner is because I know what it's like having a child that doesn't sleep. My youngest didn't sleep until he was about 7 or 8, and I literally mean he slept 4 hours in any 24-hour period until we did a sleep program, and now he sleeps for 7 or 8, so it made a huge difference. And that's why we feel it's really important at CAAS to share knowledge on sleep and how to ensure our children get a good night's sleep. Zena and I are going to go through a PowerPoint presentation this morning. I'm going to share the PowerPoint in a minute after Zena's introduced herself. But just to say, if you've got any questions as we go through the morning, then please use the question and answer box that's just at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to answer all the questions as we go through. Zena.
Hi everybody. Thanks Glenys, thanks Lynn. I'm Zena, I'm one of the family support workers at the Centre for ADHD and Autism, and part of my work there is running the sleep workshops for families. So I am a sleep practitioner. I have experience of 20 years with children and young people, and I'm passionate about sleep. Like Lynn said, it has a massive impact when we don't get enough of it. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Let me just share the PowerPoint.
So Lynn will be sharing this PDF form, won't we, after the workshop, in case anyone asks? Yeah. So you'll all be getting a copy of the PowerPoint, and we'll send that to you at the end. Thank you. So, a little bit about why we need sleep. Why do we need sleep? You know, what's so important about it? As Glenys just mentioned, it affects every part of our life, our mental, emotional and physical well-being. And people think you close your eyes, you go to sleep and nothing happens. We're just shut down from the whole world. But actually, inside our brains at that point, we've got a busy office working. A part of our brain is called the hippocampus. And in that part of the brain, you've got all of your paperwork, and each bit is separated out if we're getting enough sleep and if we're getting good sleep. So we'll have our little bits of information. It might be things like, what am I going to wear tomorrow? Which is not very important. It's not a priority. It might be more important things like, I need to hand an assignment in. I've got a deadline. I'm suffering with a friendship at the moment and I don't know what to do. I don't want to go to school anymore. No one accepts me. So you've got all of these things going through your head as a young person. And what will happen in your brain at night is your office separates all these bits of information. So it brings the important things to the forefront. So when you wake up in the morning after a good night's sleep, you're able to then focus on those priorities and put things like, what am I wearing today? Or what's the weather like? What am I going to eat for lunch? Those will go behind those more important and pressing and urgent things. So we really need sleep in every way to function the next day. We need it to function in many ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Next slide, please, Lynn. So the impact of sleep deprivation on our families is huge. And it's something to really step back and think about. If we're not getting enough sleep, if our youngsters are not getting enough sleep, how are they going to feel? You're more likely to not want to listen. Your emotions are going to be up and down. It impacts on our health. It impacts on so many areas of things. In fact, in some countries, it's used as a form of torture, not having sleep at night. And there's actually a lack of support for that. People don't take that into account when they're working with you or working with your youngsters. Have they had enough sleep? We think about so many other areas of our health. We look after our hair, our skin, our body, our teeth. But do we actually do sleep hygiene? Are we getting a good routine in place? Are we sticking to it? Are we being consistent? Or is it something that we slack on? And is it something that you wake up in the morning and you think, why are they being like this today? What's happened? Actually, it could be as simple as they're not sleeping. And are they able to communicate that to you? Do you know they're not sleeping? And what's causing that sleep deprivation? I mean, there is research to show the impact on families, the breakdown of families when there isn't sleep happening. And whoever that's with, it might be the parents or the youngster, it's massive, it's huge. And I think these pictures, we've put them up there because it really shows what can happen. Falling asleep, trying to study. You've got your youngsters who are adamant that they want to get through, they want to do good, they want to get good grades, and they'll be trying their best to work. They'll either be working away through the night or the opposite, where they're struggling so much that they're trying to work in the day and falling asleep while they're working. Or you've got the young boy in the middle who's just finished. To me, that looks like a young lad who's just done. It's like, I can't take this anymore. No one understands, but the impact of him not getting that sleep is going to make him feel that way. And, you know, lastly, we've got the little boy who looks quite young, who's not even able to look at his food. It's just like, stop there. So it's huge. The effect of not having sleep is massive. And some of you might think, actually, I'm fine on a couple of hours. I'm fine on 4 or 5 hours. I can do it. And your youngsters will say that, I can do it. But actually look at them when they've had a good night's sleep to when they haven't had a good night's sleep. And you'll probably see a huge difference. It's something to look at when you're spotting anxiety and worry and mood change in your youngsters. Just think about how much sleep they're having. Next slide, Lynn.
So if we're going to understand sleep difficulties, we need to think about the factors that influence sleep. So that's things like our circadian rhythm, sleep pressure, and arousal. So sleep is largely controlled by sleep pressure or drive and their circadian rhythm. So that's our body clock, and that's what regulates all of our biological and physiological processes. Interestingly, our body clock doesn't actually reflect a 24-hour day. It's 24 hours and 11 minutes, which isn't much in a day, but it is over a month. So in an ideal situation, the circadian rhythm will naturally rise in the early morning, promoting wakefulness and alertness, and will reach a peak in the evening. As darkness comes in, our circadian rhythm drops to its lowest level, and it helps us maintain sleep. So unfortunately, for those of us that are night owls, we're always going to be fighting against our natural sleep rhythm. So we need to think about sleep pressure. So sleep pressure builds up during the day, and after a waking period of about 15 hours, the pressure to sleep becomes greater and greater. So in other words, we get tired. If we nap during the day, that reduces sleep pressure, which is why it's not a good idea once your children are probably 3-4 years old. And then lastly, we need to consider arousal. So basically what's been going on for us during the day. We need to think about anxiety, worry and anger. And scientists have actually found a direct link between anxiety and sleep. So when you're anxious, your heart rate goes up, your mind races, and your brain's alert. And once your brain's stimulated in that way, other worries are activated, making it even harder to sleep. So as that pattern sets in, sleep in itself becomes something that we're anxious about. So we need to think about sleep cycles. So full sleep cycle is around 60 to 90 minutes, but we generally don't remember waking. So we're not designed to sleep for 8 hours sleep, 8 hours straight. You know, in the past, and our ancestors in the days of the caveman, you would wake all of the time just to be sure that you're safe. So within the sleep cycle, we've got different stages of sleep. So we've got our N1, which is our non-REM sleep. So that's the point where we kind of, it's the change from wakefulness to sleep. So during this period of light sleep, our heart rate and breathing slows and our muscles start to relax. Brain waves begin to slow. We're somewhat alert and can be easily woken. So that's like, you know, when you're sitting and you think you're awake and you do this kind of thing and you wake yourself up, that's that period. And then we move into our N2 non-REM sleep. So again, heart rate and breathing continue to slow, muscles relax even further. So our body temperature drops and our eye movements stop. So we spend more time in stage 2 sleep than in any other sleep stage. And this is kind of where you think somebody's napping. So you've sat and you've eaten full Christmas dinner and everybody's watching TV, and you go to change the channel and your partner's like, oh, I was watching that, and you're like, no, you were asleep. Or if you're laying in bed with your child and you've convinced yourself that you're asleep and you go to get up and they wake, they're like, where are you going? And from that, we move into stage 3 non-REM sleep. So this is the period of deep sleep that we need to feel refreshed in the morning. It occurs in longer periods in the first half of the night, as you'll see in the chart, and much less in the second half of the night. So heart rate and breathing slows to their lowest levels, muscles are relaxed, and it is probably going to be difficult to waken you at this point. And if you are woken from deep sleep, then you're going to be all groggy and disorientated. So at this point, our body repairs its muscles and tissues, it stimulates growth, development, boosts immune function, and builds up energy for the next day. So following that, we go into REM sleep. So REM sleep first happens around about 90 minutes after we fall asleep and can last for about an hour. So REM sleep is what we also class as dream sleep. So during this final phase, our brain becomes more active. Eyes move rapidly from side to side, but behind closed eyelids. Heart rate and blood pressure increase, and breathing becomes faster, irregular, and shallow. REM sleep plays an important part in learning and memory function, because this is where our brain consolidates and processes information from the day before so that it can be stored in our long-term memory. A good night's sleep will consist of about 5 or 6 sleep cycles, and as you age, you spend less of your time in the REM or dream sleep. And this slide, as Zena mentioned, you will get the handouts. It's just an indicator of average sleep needs. It is average, so there will be variation. So, you know, it says the average 10-year-old needs 9 3/4 hours sleep, but normal could be anything from 8 to 10.5, 11 hours. So it is just an average. There is some research to show that if you've got a child or young person who's got a diagnosis of ADHD or autism, then they do need less sleep. There is some research that shows different melatonin production and regulation.
So why are we not sleeping? Why are youngsters not sleeping? There's loads of different areas of why you're not getting enough sleep. And I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but some things to keep in mind are, you know, is it something like a shared bedroom? Is it the more basic things like hunger or thirst? Stress and anxiety play a huge part of our youngsters not sleeping. And when there is stress and anxiety, we'll come on to this a bit further, but it's trying to pinpoint what that is, because it might be something that needs managing through life rather than just at bedtime. So it's not necessarily going to be a one-night fix. Or we'll come to some ways of managing sleep and managing anxiety, but they will need to be consistent, and you'll need to work on things during the day if there's an anxiety that is threaded through their week, threaded through their life, in fact. We're going to talk about medical issues that might be coming up for your youngsters. There's also not being tired. So if you're getting your kids to go to sleep at a point where they're not tired, they'll stay awake, and it's a bit of a knock-on effect. They just will find it so difficult to sleep, and they'll form a relationship with sleep which won't be healthy. They won't like it. They won't look forward to it. So it's about going to bed when you are tired, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. There's hormones that will also kick in with your teens, which changes how much sleep they might need. In fact, there is some research around teenagers where as they become teens, they need to go to bed a bit later. They're not tired as early. However, the way our school system works, they've got to be up for school, and it doesn't quite fit in with how much time they're getting to sleep and how they become sleepy much later. So it's trying to fit things in and be consistent. And what we do suggest is, if you're trying to focus on sleep and get a routine in place and get some of that healthy sleep hygiene going, there does need to be consistency, at least while it gets sorted. And then you can give or take a little bit, but while you're getting it sorted, it's got to be consistent. So there's a variation of reasons why your youngsters might not be sleeping, and it's a bit of playing detective and finding out what are those things, what's going on for them out of this list. Is there something beyond it? One thing we have up here is sleep associations. Next slide, please, Lynn. So sleep associations are things that we use to fall asleep with. Now, if we think about all of our senses, so we've got our 5 senses, and then we've got 3 senses that you might have heard of and you might not have heard of. And one of those is proprioception, and it's where your body is in space. So for young people who might have a challenge with their proprioception, they might want a tight blanket around them, or they just want to kind of hug themselves to sleep, or have something that tucks them in really tightly and cocoons them. And it's things like that. It's just where they are in space. And then there is interoception. So that's the internal senses. When do I need to wee? When do I need to go to the toilet? When do I feel hungry, full? And they might have challenges with those. So they might not know, actually, I need to go to the loo. I need to get out of bed and go to the loo, or I need to go to the loo before I go to sleep. All of those things might be impacting their sleep. And when we look at sleep associations, it's really thinking about what's going on when your young person falls asleep. So for example, you may naturally sleep on your right-hand side. So you go to bed, you get into bed, and you're on the right-hand side of the bed, and you sleep on your right-hand side. And for us as adults, we naturally, in those waking hours Lynn was talking about earlier, where you have your sleep cycles, and then you have a period where you're slightly awake, we can actually put ourselves back into that position and fall asleep without even realizing we were a bit awake. For our youngsters, they can't do that sometimes. So they wake up, and if that sleep association isn't there, and it could be something as simple as being on their right-hand side, it could be a certain blanket they use, a smell that's in the room, a sound that they hear. Something that happens with our teenagers is they like the hubble bubble, the sound of their parents or people downstairs and the TV on, and they'll fall asleep perhaps with that on. And when they wake up in the middle of the night and it's that light sleep mode, it's not there anymore. And that might be their waking point. So it's really looking at what are they falling asleep with? And you can get healthy sleep associations and unhealthy sleep associations. So the healthy ones are ones which we can do for ourselves. So obviously, as I was saying, for us as adults, and maybe for some of our youngsters, they can easily put a cover back on themselves or turn themselves to the right side of the bed. However, if it's something like you've got the landing light on and then it's off, they're going to have to get out of bed and switch it back on again, because that's how they feel comfortable. And that's something they're going to have to wake up and do. So it is disrupting their sleep. So with sleep associations, it sounds like a small thing, but it's quite a big thing. And you can also get into habits through life, which you don't realize you've done. So for example, for myself, I always slept with a radio on, a really quiet radio on, and I fell asleep with it on. And when I got married, there was no radio on because my partner couldn't have the radio on. It was really hard for me to change that habit. It took me months to get used to going to bed without the radio on anymore. So looking at what are your youngsters falling asleep with? Lynn, did you want to add anything on that?
Just that, particularly if you've got younger children, a lot of the things that we use that we think will help sleep with our younger children, so like cot mobiles, for example, our child falls asleep with a cot mobile on and they're on a timer, so it switches off. So when they come to that kind of almost waking phase, and the situation's different, what we do is we go back in and we switch the cot mobile on, but what's actually happening is the cot mobile is the thing that's waking them. So a sleep association, if you have a young person who falls asleep to music or falls asleep with a night light or the hall light on, you need to be prepared to leave those things on all night, because it's the difference that stops us sleeping. So it's like when you're sleeping in a hotel room, you know, you wake up and you think, oh God, I've seen the clock every hour, and it's because it's an unfamiliar environment, things are different. So it's kind of like, one of the examples my kind of sleep trainer used was that it's like if we go to sleep in bed, and then whilst we're asleep, somebody picks us up and puts us on the kitchen floor. When you wake, you're going to fully awake because everything's different. So as sleep practitioners, we wouldn't recommend things like taking your child for a drive in the car to make them fall asleep, or taking them for a walk in the buggy to fall asleep, or even rocking them to sleep once they get to a certain age, because that's what they're going to need continuously to fall back asleep. So being able to self-settle is really important.
Thanks, Lynn. Next slide. So we've got signs and symptoms of stress here, and this is really a self-explanatory slide, but looking at your youngsters and thinking about what's happening for them, like we talked about earlier, that anxiety, where's it coming from? And these are some of the things you might see in them. So you've got the things around cognitive thinking, you've got memory problems that might be coming into play, that inability to concentrate, poor judgment, seeing only the negative, anxious and racing thoughts, the constant worrying. And I'm sure as parents, you've seen these things in some of your youngsters, and they might be able to verbalize them, or they might be holding these inside and not be able to tell you about them. With physical aches and pains and things they might be feeling, one of the things that really stands out to me is the grinding teeth. So if you're hearing them grind their teeth, that is one of the signs and symptoms of stress, and it's thinking about where's that coming from and what's going on for them. So again, it's around asking questions and giving them opportunities to talk to you more about why these things might be happening for them. Frequent colds and flus, you know, or feeling tired. You know, a lot of our youngsters will come in and just want to be under a blanket the minute they get in, and that can be down to anxiety, stress, and a lack of sleep. And we've got the cycle up here because it's that circle. So it can stem from one of these things. The tiredness will then bring on the anxiety. That will then trigger off the insomnia, and it carries on going round. So you've got to find the point of anxiety. Where is that coming from to start the rest of this off? So you've got to get at that middle point and try and figure out what it is. Of course, emotionally, you're going to see unhappiness. You might see change of mood, feeling overwhelmed, and just the not coping. I can't cope anymore. I can't do this. I'm tired. And you'll feel the tiredness in the body language that you see, in their voices, in what they're saying to you, in how they're getting angry, but also what they're not saying to you. They don't want to talk anymore. You know, they're not sure what it is. They're not sure what's causing it. And then obviously you've got the behavioural things which happen, and there's various things on the list here. So it's looking at each of these things, and if you can just use this list and maybe think about your young person and possibly tick off some of the things you might see. Why are they happening? Do you know why they're happening? Or is it something you need to give them the opportunity to talk about? And I say give them the opportunity to talk about because asking questions doesn't always work. It's about listening to them when they want to talk and when they're ready, giving them quiet moments and not asking them specific questions and badgering them about it. Because when you hit that teenage, you just want to shut your door and be. And a parent coming in and constantly asking things about everything you're going through or what you're seeing in your youngster can be more of an off-put and be more of a reason to shut that door and not share. So just be aware of those signs and symptoms. And like I said earlier, if they are happening, try and work on them through the day. So it's not just about going in at night. Of course, there's fixes. Grinding teeth, you could get, you know, a teeth guard. But is that helping the stress? So yes, it might help the health of their teeth. Is it helping what they're going through in their heads? Nausea and dizziness you'll find when young people haven't had enough sleep. You know, things will come up for them where you think, gosh, there's something wrong with their health, but what is causing that? Just try and look underneath these behaviours, these things. What is the trigger? What's the underlying cause? Next slide, Lynn.
So stress and anxiety can lead to insomnia, and I think for lots of us at the minute, particularly as we're going through COVID, is this inability to just switch off and go to sleep because life's uncertain, rules keep changing, none of us are really sure what's going on, and it can lead to insomnia. So that can be difficulty falling asleep, it can be waking up through the night, it can be waking up too early in the morning, and it will lead to feeling tired, irritable, and having trouble concentrating during the day. So we need to think about melatonin when we're talking about insomnia. So melatonin is kind of sleep hormone, and it responds to light and dark. So our optic nerve in our eyes linked to our pineal gland, which produces melatonin. So light has got a significant effect on sleep. Exposure to light early in the day stimulates the body and mind, making us feel ready for the day. So we're awake, we're alert, and if we've had a good night's sleep, we'll be full of energy. But the same is true for light at night. So light exposure at night will also stimulate alertness, and that can pose a serious problem for getting refreshing sleep and can make it harder to fall asleep. So insufficient darkness through the night can lead to more awakeness. So that's why when we get to recommendations, we'll talk about kind of no light, no screens before bed, and your room having to be dark. When we're talking about light, though, in terms of melatonin production, we're talking about lux, which is natural light. So being inside all of the time is not good for healthy sleep. And just to give you a little bit of perspective on lux, on a sunny summer day, your environment might be in the range of 150,000 lux, but on a cloudy winter day, when the sun's further from us, typical measurement might be as low as 1,000. So that's where things like a SAD or a daylight lamp can come in useful. Just very quickly, a word on sleep disorders versus sleep difficulties. So for some sleep difficulties, there will be a medical basis, and in that case, you're going to want to seek advice from your GP. So just some examples of that might be restless leg syndrome, I don't know if anybody else experiences it. I get restless legs and it is absolutely horrendous. Just, you've got to move. It almost feels like there's bugs under your skin. It's the weirdest sensation. But that can be linked to things like low iron or anemia. So things like magnesium spray, magnesium tablets can help, but you want to see your GP. Rhythmic moving disorder is something that is more common in children. So you might have a child that rocks themselves to sleep or that headbangs themselves to sleep. Again, that's something you're going to want to seek medical advice for. And then we've got parasomnia. So we've got our night terrors, sleepwalking. So night terrors happen to children, but they also still happen into adulthood. They tend to happen in the first part of the night. We're unlikely to remember them. So I think night terrors, it's where you go in, your child's really distraught, they're inconsolable, you're not quite sure if they're awake, quite hard to console. They're unlikely to remember them, and they're way more traumatic for us as parents than they are for our children. And then we've also got nightmares, which happen in our dream sleep, so in the second half of the night. So a child, a young person, adult is more likely to remember their nightmares and be distressed by them. So they are something that you might need to discuss afterwards. So sleepwalking also happens in non-REM, in our dream sleep. It's not dangerous to wake somebody if they're sleepwalking. There is kind of a myth around that. It's dangerous if you wake someone, it'll cause their heart to stop, or whatever myths there are. It's not dangerous, but it's better for their sleep if you don't wake them, if you just guide them back to bed. And then lastly, we've got sleep apnea. So that's where your breathing pauses during sleep. So if you've got somebody that snores a lot, or and then they do that they stop breathing, and then they kind of do that kind of catching their breath, that leads to a fall in oxygen and causes sleep disturbance. And it's definitely something that you want to see your GP for, because you can get things like a CPAP machine, which can ensure you've got regular oxygen through the night.
Thanks, Lynn. I was just going to add on the sleepwalking. If any of you do have sleepwalkers, it's just worth keeping everything safe. Your windows locked, your doors locked. And one of the ideas that one of our sleep practitioners came out with was putting bells on the door. So if they open a door, you can hear them. You can hear them when they've started sleepwalking, more so just to make sure they're safe rather than protecting them from sleepwalking. When we come on to ways to reduce the anxiety and aid sleep, again, there's various things. We've got a few things here. So we've got aromatherapy, a warm bath. So the suggestion of a warm bath within half an hour before bedtime. So not necessarily 2 hours before, but actually keeping it to that 30-minute slot before they go to sleep. And the reason for that is it's about the drop in temperature in your body. So you have a warm bath, and as your body comes down in temperature, slowly you get sleep ready. It makes you much more sleep ready. So if they can't have a warm bath, you can always pop their pajamas or something either in a dryer or hang them up on a warm radiator, so they're just warm, and they pop them on and they cool down with it, and that gets them sleep ready. There is yoga that some people will do. Some of our youngsters are into religion or spirituality, and that can look very different for everyone. So it's whatever their comfort is, whatever makes them feel like this is going to help me relax, this is going to keep me safe while I'm sleeping. There's meditation, there's mindfulness. I think there's a few apps now. There's one called Headspace, and you can get that on Netflix as well as online. There are others as well, which do the mindfulness and the meditation. And then there's the journaling and talking. Now, it's really thinking about, what does your youngster want? Do they want to have a chat with you before they go to sleep to get rid of the things that are bugging them? Or are they more comfortable writing it out? Writing a journal, perhaps drawing it out, whatever it takes for them. So these are all different things, and you might think of something completely different. In fact, if you have got any ideas, it'd be great to hear them. because different people, different young people, they all work in very individual ways, and it's for us to just think about what will help them. And when it comes to the anxiety, again, the same as it is for us as adults, when we're going to bed with our heads ticking, so we're all in bad habits, you know, we all watch TV till the last minute, we possibly go to bed with our mobile phones under our pillows, and we're talking about adults here, let alone our teenagers, where the world is around social media. And if you think about what might be on social media for them, so friendships, relationships, you know, Facebook, my perfect family, my perfect friendships, my perfect life, really, which it isn't, but that's what your youngsters are possibly going to sleep with. So they're having the screen time, which we recommend they don't have. I think it's 2 hours before sleep. Is that right, Lynn? Is it 2 hours?
So we recommend an hour.
An hour.
And a half is when kind of research says that blue light in particular has an impact on sleep, but it's just light in general as opposed to screens. But screens are better not to use for alertness, for kind of just kind of keeping the brain going.
Yeah, so you've got, so it's really worth thinking about how are they going to bed, and if they are anxious, you know, is it healthy for them to have their phone next to them at bedtime? Is it not? I know for myself, if I wake up and I think I'm still worried about something, I might use my phone to actually journal on. I might write down the things because I need them off my head. But while we're working with our youngsters to help them sleep, it will be good to give them the opportunity to do that before they go to sleep rather than during sleep. So just think about what they might need at that point. And like we've talked about, just remember that anxiety is not just going to go in one night. So it's something that needs working on. It will need working on through the weeks. And then think about how sleep can be better. But if we are following a good routine, we're trying to put everything we need in place, then it should help them to have a better sleep at least, and be on the beginning of that journey to get a better sleep and to reduce that anxiety. Next slide, please, Lynn. So also looking at what are they eating before bedtime? I mean, we often hear about, oh, don't have coffee before bedtime because it's got caffeine in it. But what else has caffeine in it? You've got, you know, hot chocolate, you've got just chocolate, you've got various foods with caffeine in them. Some of the protein bars our youngsters might be having have got caffeine in them. So it's really looking at ingredients and what's inside what they're eating to think about, is there caffeine? Is there sugar? So sugar is a stimulant, and if you're giving them sugar or they're having sugar before bedtime, that can also cause insomnia, and they'll go to bed a lot later. Blackcurrant can irritate bladders, so it's thinking about that as well. There are other foods. Next slide, Lynn. So there are foods which are melatonin rich. Now, melatonin is a hormone that helps sleep, it aids sleep. So you've got almonds, which contain magnesium, which also helps sleep, and it helps muscle relaxation. Bananas contain magnesium and potassium and tryptophan. So they do contain sugar as well. So not 3 bananas or 2, just the 1. And they also say that dairy, so anything that's dairy, yogurt, milk, cheese, calcium, and that's effective in stress reduction. And then you've got oatmeal, cherries, cereal, turkey and fish, again, are rich in tryptophans, which aid sleep. So there's various foods you can look at which help sleep. And it's worth thinking about what they're keeping in their rooms as teenagers too. Have they got, you know, a few chocolate bars plotted around the place and crisps, and are they having them right at the last minute before sleep? And of course you don't want them going to bed on a hungry tummy, but at the same time you want them to have the right foods that are going to aid their sleep and not foods that are going to disrupt their sleep. Thanks, Lynn. Next slide. Now, the sleep environment is quite interesting here. So what they advise for a sleep environment is where you sleep is where you sleep. You try not to associate it with work or with playing and clutter. It's meant to be just to sleep. Your bedroom is to sleep in. However, as we know, our teenagers work in their bedrooms. You know, they game in their bedrooms. They do everything in their bedrooms. Their bedrooms are their haven. When we were talking earlier about light, so Lynn had mentioned having blackout blinds in place, having a room where there's not light coming through, especially when it is summer, because it gets lighter a lot earlier. So trying to have blackout blinds in place, keeping it minimal. So if they are having to work or game in their bedroom, is there a way that they can shut that bit down? Can they cover it up? Can they, you know, turn it round backwards, or have their bed in a position where that part of the bedroom is away from their work and their distractions? Keeping it clutter-free if possible. So we've got a bedroom in the right-hand corner, which, as you can see, it looks like a lovely bedroom, but it's got a lot of clutter and colour in it and things all over the place. Now, your young person going to sleep in a room like that is going to distract them. There's just too much distraction, and there's a lot of light in that room already. Now, if you look at, excuse me, at the picture in the middle, you've got a screen on already. So there's a screen on and there is light coming through the window. It's dark colours, so that's good. It's about keeping the colours as simple as you can. But if you look at the last bedroom, the blue bedroom, that is slightly more dim. It doesn't have distractions around the place. It seems fairly tidy. There's not a computer up, there's not screens. So you want to try and keep the bedroom minimalist and get them to declutter their room before they go to sleep, because that's what's really important about having that good sleep environment and switching off from everything else that they've done in it. Because if you're playing on your game and you're gaming and then you're getting straight into bed, your game is still on. And like I talked about the phone, it's still on, it's still there. It's a distraction. So keeping it as simple, decluttered as possible. Thanks. Lynn, next slide.
So if you go to anybody for support with sleep for your child or young person, the first thing that they're going to ask you to do is keep a sleep diary. We find at CAAS, people are quite reluctant to complete the sleep diaries, but it is really important because it can help us as sleep practitioners actually start to pick up where the challenges are with sleep. But often, even for yourselves as parents, as you complete a sleep diary, then you will start to notice things yourself that impact on your young person's sleep. So sometimes the problem will be immediately obvious, and others will take a little bit of unpicking. Normally you track your sleep over 2 or 3 weeks before we would even look at kind of implementing a sleep program. So from the sleep diaries, you would then look at implementing a sleep program. And this is where kind of it leads into routine, it leads into good sleep hygiene and all of those things. And routine definitely helps. And most parents who've got a young person with sleep difficulties will say, I've done that, I've tried all of the things, it just doesn't work. And there's nothing that we will tell you that is new to you. There's nothing that we will tell you that's rocket science, but actually the consistency is really important. Going to bed at the same time every night, but also getting up at the same time in the morning. So we all kind of like a long lie on the weekends, particularly if we've got an early start during the week, but you should get up within an hour, maximum 2 of your regular sleep time in order to maintain good sleep. And none of this is a problem if you've got a child or young person that sleeps, or if you sleep well yourself. It's only a problem if it's a problem. in terms of sleep routine, you need to think about who's going to be involved in your sleep routine. So who's going to do it, when, where, how, and what you're going to do. So one key thing is that your sleep routine should start an hour before your child falls asleep. So often, you know, we'll have families who start their sleep routine at 6 o'clock, but bedtime's not till 9. That's not a sleep routine. Sometimes we will have families who want their children to go to bed at 7:30, but the child doesn't fall asleep till 9. So if your child's not actually physically falling asleep till 9, there is no point in starting your sleep routine at 7:30. You're going to start your sleep routine at 8:30. And then what you do is you can move it back kind of by 15 minutes weekly, or probably 2 weekly initially. So you can move their sleep time back, their bedtime back, but it always starts from when they fall asleep. Same with teenagers. If you've got a teen who's up at 2 till 2 in the morning, you're not going to get them to go to bed at 10:30, 11. It's just not going to happen. So with a sleep routine, you want to plan quiet time. You want to think about what they're doing in their activity time before bed. So you're not going to want them to be on screens, and ideally you're going to look at hand-eye coordination activities, so colouring in, Lego, anything that kind of uses hand, brain, eye. You are going to want to think about having a bath or a shower in the evenings. If a bath or a shower makes your child really hyperactive, then you can think about something else instead. It might be that you pop their pajamas in the tumble dryer for 5 minutes before they put them on, or pop them on a radiator. And the reason for that is that kind of a bath or hot pajamas raises your body temperature, then your body temperature drops, which again signals it's time to go to sleep. We want to avoid screens, as we said, A, because of the light stimulation, but B, just because of stimulation in general. With that, it means no screens for anybody else in the house either. It's going to be really difficult to do a bedtime routine with a young person if siblings are sitting watching TV or sitting playing on the computer in a similar room. One of the other things that we say is that once your child has gone to their room, so once you've had their bath, you've gone to the room, got their pajamas on, you don't go back downstairs to the public area. So snacks and activities will all happen before bath time. Once you've had your bath, you get your child into bed, you might read a story or do some massage, play a little bit of music. If you are playing music, remember the sleep associations, you need to be able to leave it on or switch it off before they actually fall asleep. And then you're going to want to keep your hugs and kisses and all of those things to the same length each night. And if we help you set up a sleep routine, we'll look at your child's individual triggers, because there's always that situation where you've put them to bed and they come down, oh, I'm thirsty. Well, actually, you're not thirsty because we had your snack half an hour ago. Oh, I need to go to the toilet, but you don't because you've been to the toilet half an hour ago. I need an extra kiss or cuddle. They're always going to find excuses. And the one thing I will say as a parent who's suffered from sleep deprivation for years is that you've got to be in the right place to do it. You cannot put a sleep program in place if you don't feel ready, if you don't have the time to do it. Ideally, holidays is probably a good time to do it. You've got to be able to be consistent. If you start a sleep routine and then you get 4 or 5 nights in and you give in, you let your child come into your bed, you get in with them, whatever it looks like for you, you're setting yourself up for failure, because the next time you start a sleep routine, the bar is set that bit higher. So you've got to be ready before you start it. You've got to be prepared that it's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. But hold on to the fact that it will get better, because it will, it can, it does. And then just to finish with just some good sleep habits. So as we said, you know, keep regular sleep times, even on the weekends and in holidays. Avoid going to bed full, hungry or thirsty. So your snack, your bedtime snack, wants to be a light snack. It's not going to be a full dinner. Stop all screens, as we said. If you've got a child who is anxious, or you are anxious yourself, then you want to think about different activities to kind of reduce that anxiety or stress. If for teens and adults you're wanting to avoid caffeine, nicotine and alcohol, dim your lights and close your curtains. Darkness is really important to a good night's sleep. But if you've got a child who is anxious about being in the dark, then that's something we can look at with you as well. The other thing to be aware of for teens and adults is the 20-minute rule. So don't lay in bed awake. So if you go to bed and you're not asleep within 20 minutes, then what they suggest you do is you get up, you get out of bed, and you do a kind of mindful, calming activity. And then when you feel sleepy again, go back into bed and just repeat that until you actually fall asleep, because there is nothing more frustrating than lying in bed trying to sleep. You can't force yourself to sleep, unfortunately. And I think lastly, just be realistic. Ask for help. You're not alone. There is a lot of support out there in terms of sleep. In terms of organisations for sleep support, if you've got a child who's got ADHD or autism, or suspected ADHD or autism or linked conditions, then you can come to CAAS and we can provide sleep support. If you have got a child with no disabilities, then the Sleep Charity is the organisation that I would recommend is your first point of contact. They've got sleep practitioners all across the country, but they've also got really useful videos, really useful fact sheets and information that you can download on sleep. And then Sleep Council is another website that's got some really good information out there. Do you have anything else you want to add, Sina?
No, I was just going to say thank you for listening and thank you for being here today. And we hope you found it useful, found some bits that you can start on. And just echoing what Lynn said, really, is being realistic and being ready to start. And if you've got more than one person who's managing sleep in the house and managing your youngster, make sure that you're both on the same page and you've got the same ideas. Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to thank you both so much. That was really informative. And like you said, some of it's not rocket science, but definitely good to have reminders around some of those key triggers. We've answered some of the chat. Personally, people have had some queries, and we just hope that you all find ways to have a better night's sleep. And I'd like to thank you all for attending. Thank you. Have a good day.